Thousands of protesters rallying against the Lebanese political elite blocked roads in the centre of Beirut this Tuesday. The protesters scuffled with riot police as they closed all roads leading to the Parliament building. And there are reports that matters have since deteriorated. Let's bring in, without any delay, our correspondent Layla Allen, who of course is in Beirut, joining us now live. Layla, tell us more about the situation.
So this evening, we saw more violent clashes between protesters and riot police. That did happen earlier this morning. I was there this morning when protesters gathered from about 6 a.m. And between that time and 11 a.m., when the Parliament was supposed to have this session that they were able to block, there were several violent scuffles, riot police beating young protesters with batons and chasing them. That did go on for a couple of hours, but then things calmed down once the announcement happened that they had succeeded in blocking the session. However, this evening, things seemed very quiet. Initially, people seemed to have gone off back to their lives, but actually, many people were gathered for a football match in downtown Beirut that was being held in Martyrs Square, being screened. And after that, they all streamed back to Riyadh al-Salah, this area where riot police have shut off Parliament with barbed wire. And there, hundreds of them gathered again and started chanting next to the Parliament, saying, "Let us in, allow us access to Parliament." And a couple of young men started to throw stones at riot police. And at this point, this was this evening between about 9 and 10 p.m., the gate in their base, in the riot police base, opened and they poured out and they started individually chasing and targeting protesters. I was there watching them knock several young men to the ground and beat them, groups of riot police beating individual young protesters with batons. Two were beaten unconscious. Protesters were calling for the Lebanese Red Cross to come. They managed to put one in an ambulance, but the other one was dragged off behind the barbed wire by riot police, as were 7 other young men. And I then watched as riot police, once they had taken the barbed wire, continued to beat and kick them once they were on the floor. Now, this was quite an extreme reaction, it appears, to what happened there. There have certainly been more violent clashes in this area near Parliament, because it does appear riot police have instructions, if they have any feeling that protesters might be trying to cross that barrier and get to Parliament, to be more aggressive. But they were targeting anybody who had a phone or a camera who was trying to film it. Extreme aggression tonight from those riot police, and concern over those 8 young men who have been detained but not charged.
Layla, this is clearly a very disturbing turn of events. Is this likely to be the start of perhaps a stronger kind of clampdown situation, with the authorities perhaps getting tougher with the protesters?
So we have been seeing clashes like this repeatedly since the beginning of the protests. We do have these small scuffles, particularly in this area of Beirut, as well as in other cities across Lebanon. Of course, this area is so sensitive because Parliament is there. So we have had clashes like this. But the fact that riot police were reacting so angrily to very little provocation, in other situations there has been more violence that they've been reacting to, or at least a threat in some way to a building or to ministers. That wasn't the case this evening. And it's possible that that's because of what happened today. Now, in some ways, a Rubicon was passed today, with protesters managing to stop this controversial session of Parliament in which the caretaker government was trying to pass a few laws. And the reason for that is that up until now, protesters have achieved things like blocking roads, general destabilizing of the country, trying to cut things off and get their demands met. But today was a very specific situation. This session was meant to be held last week. The Speaker of Parliament, Nabi Berri, cancelled it when the protests were planned because of security concerns. But today, he said they were absolutely going to meet. And what you had was a very organised protest movement, putting out maps of exactly where they were going to stand and oppose. Parliament saying they were absolutely going to have their session. MPs trying any method they could to reach Parliament, including one minister's bodyguard who fired live rounds into the air to try and clear protesters, and they did not manage it. As one protester said to me, today was a personal challenge between us and our so-called government. They say that because it's a caretaker government and they haven't nominated a new government since the resignation of the Prime Minister. It is illegitimate, so the protesters say. So they said, we won. We didn't know we could do this. And now that we know that we can, we know that they can put the entire force of the Lebanese riot police, security forces, army against us. We stood there, we took it, and we managed to win. Protesters feeling incredibly emboldened and feeling that they can force Parliament's hand and bring about their demands.